Time having arrived, I'd like to invite Chaplain Remco Brummett, Chaplain for the City of Milton Fire and Police Forces, to come forward and give the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I invite all of us present here to join me in prayer. Almighty God in heaven, in this Thanksgiving week, we pause to express our gratitude for all the things that we so often take for granted. We get up in the morning in our heated or cooled homes. We have coffee waiting for us, toast in a toaster, enough food in the refrigerator. We are surrounded by a plethora of stores, and we have food and clothing and personal comfort items in abundance. We are surrounded with good schools and good medical care and good dental care. We get in our comfortable cars and drive on good roads in a beautiful environment while we enjoy a quality of life second to none. And we want to acknowledge today and give you thanks that these things come directly and indirectly from your hand, from your blessings. And so we thank you very, very much. And Father, we pray that tonight on the City Council and the Mayor, you bestow your blessing and give them wisdom in handling the affairs of the city. Protect the police officers that are out on patrol and the firefighters that are standing by to respond to emergencies. And bless the city, the city's residents and citizens with your grace and your mercy once more. And we pray this in your name. Amen.
I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, 21 November 2011 to order. Will the City Clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I will be happy to call roll for the November 21st, 2011 regular meeting. I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Additionally, those attending the meeting who would like to provide public comment either during the public hearing or during the call for public comment, you are required to complete a public comment card prior to speaking on an item. There is no public comment for consent agenda items or items under first presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards are received by the City Clerk prior to the beginning of tonight's meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization if applicable. The City Council may allow public comment on either an agenda item or general public comment from a representative of such an organized group or association, provided, however, that such an individual shall file a notarized affidavit that they have the authority to speak on behalf of said organization on a form provided by the City Clerk prior to the agenda item being called. Demonstration of any sort within this chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outbursts, or dialogue with any person speaking. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you will expect to receive yourself. Anyone in violation will be asked to leave. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Pro Tem Councilmember Bill Luss.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Thurman.
Here.
Councilmember Julie Zonner Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Longoria.
Here.
Councilmember Alan Tart.
Here.
For the record, Mayor Joe Lockwood is absent and Councilmember Bert Hewitt is absent. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the City Clerk please sound the next item?
Our next item is approval of meeting agenda. This is agenda item number 11247.
Are there any other items to be considered on the agenda?
I would like to make a motion to have the agenda item RZ-1118 to create Article 6, Division 26 of the Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 64 of the City Code, H Historic District, be deferred until the December 19th meeting. I have received several emails from members of the community who said that they felt like that we needed more time, that not enough people were aware of this. I want to make sure that we can get the accurate facts out, because there's also been some misinformation that has gotten out to the community. The city attorney had given us some information at the last our council work session, and since he is not able to be with us tonight, not that you couldn't do a good job, Paul, but if it's just easier, and to make sure that we have a full council present. And I would also ask that if anyone is here to speak on that, if we could hear their comments during the public comment period, because I think it's important for us to go ahead and hear those comments.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the meeting agenda as modified. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I just have a question. In terms of a deferral, just in terms of order of our meeting, just because it is a publicly advertised meeting, and obviously deferral is one of those things that we can vote on this evening, but rather than to have that occur at the time of the agenda approval, it would seem a more matter of course to do it at the time, or at least have a discussion at the time of the actual zoning when it comes forward. And to the point about public comment, then those public comments would actually be part of the legal record of that public hearing, even if it were to be deferred. So I guess it's a statement, but it's also a question. I'm not familiar with deferring during an agenda approval when it's a zoning item, in particular when it's been properly advertised. And in particular also, at least I'm not aware that we've ever deferred something simply because we have council members who are not in attendance.
Well,
Again, a deferral can take place as a matter of course, so I would just ask whether or not this is the appropriate time to defer it as opposed to having that discussion at the time of the zoning.
Well, that was just, the council members present was just one of 5 things I named off as a reason. And number one is because, I have heard from several members of the community that they did not feel like everyone in the community was aware of this, and I think that we need additional time. And the reason why I would like to do it now rather than waiting is the fact that because I think a lot of the questions will need to be answered by our city attorney. He answered some of those last Monday at the work session, and I think it would just be important for him to be able to restate what he stated at the work session, and rather than have Mr. Fricky have to make sure he gives us the exact same information in the same manner. So I just feel like it would be better to go ahead and defer it now, and that's why I had moved to approve the agenda item with deferring that one agenda as read, except for that one item.
And again, I respect the discussion. My question still remains in terms of when is the appropriate time to bring a deferral forward, given that you've got a zoning item that was appropriately advertised.
I think the question we're looking at is whether the council wishes to conduct a public hearing. There's no problem with having the people speak in the public comment portion of the agenda. There's no restriction on what they approach. If it's taken off the agenda, there would be no public hearing, in which case just taking it off the agenda at this point in time, there should be no procedural issue with that.
But their comments will still be part of the official minutes, so they would still be something we would have going forward.
I don't believe it's part of the zoning item, however. Whereas if it's under the zoning item, it would be part of the legal requirements of the public hearing.
It would not be part of the public hearing.
Correct.
But it still would be,
But
it would
it's
still
part
be
of the public
information that we
record.
would be hearing and we could use as we needed to in making decisions.
It's going to be captured as a course of the normal conducting of a meeting.
That's fine.
If you all choose to defer this item tonight and you defer it until to December, if this item passes at this point in the meeting, it would require staff to re-advertise. I mean, we're not going to not re-advertise this item for later in the month in hopes that just people would know that it was on the agenda tonight, and if it ends up in a meeting in December that it's just there by chance, this will cause a full re-advertisement.
And again, Paul, just my question remains is that it would be fully appropriate to also still consider a deferral under the zoning agenda, which would be a more typical approach for hearing a deferral. Is that an appropriate place to also consider a deferral?
If it is taken off of the, I don't think there's any problem with taking it off of the agenda and not, the deferral would typically, I think, if after a public hearing has been conducted and the board determines that it does not have enough information, if that determination is made, we don't even want to go forward with the public hearing, I think now is the appropriate time to do that.
And again, I'm just going to ask my question one more time so I can make sure I got an answer to the question I think I posed, which was a deferral under the zoning item is also an appropriate place to have that considered
That would
to
also
make it a part of the public hearing.
A deferral at that point would also be an appropriate time.
Thank you.
So just so I understand, it's appropriate to do it now or to do it later? Okay,
Yes.
great.
So even the public comments here will be on the record, regardless if they're in the zoning agenda portion of the meeting or
But it's
if they're in
not part of a
front
legal
meeting.
public hearing, and there is a distinction between that. That's an important distinction.
It's still on the record and people will be here.
It's on the
Okay,
record,
we
it
have
will
a
be
motion.
heard, but
We have a motion and a second to approve the meeting agenda as modified. All those in favor, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is passed. The next item is public comment. Public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the mayor and city council to provide input and opinions on any matter that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. There is no discussion on items on consent agenda or first presentation from the public or from council. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city clerk. Please remember that this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone, stating your name and address for the record. You will have five minutes for remarks. City Clerk, is there any public comment?
Yes, sir. We have Miss Joan Borsellari.
Joan Borzilleri, 540 Kings County Court, Milton, Georgia. This is in regard to the historic zoning designation. I was a member of Milton's Historic Preservation Committee for 2 years and am currently serving on the Historical Preservation Commission. Tonight I am speaking as a private citizen. Please deny the historic zoning designation for the following reasons. I think it is poor public policy to have an entire zoning category for two or three properties in the whole city of Milton. The H zoning opens the door to using the original general store concept to include just about anything, including gasoline sales and whatever else might sell. This zoning change does not benefit the average Milton citizen as much as it benefits the property owner who wants to maximize his investment by inserting retail commercial in an area not zoned for it. If this is not literally spot zoning, it is effectively spot zoning, as it introduces commercial retail into an area currently zoned AG1. History could be preserved as well by marking these properties with historic signs and using the structures for a business allowed under the current AG1 zoning, for example, a feed store or a veterinarian's office. Lee Burns from the State of Georgia Department of Natural Resources is of the opinion that no historic zoning category exists in any other municipality in Georgia. Please deny the historic zoning designation. Thank you.
That's all, sir.
Thank you. Public comment section is closed. Moving on to the consent agenda, will the city clerk sound the items?
First item is approval of the November 7th, 2011 regular council minutes. Agenda item number 11248. Second, approval of the November 14th, 2011 work session minutes. Agenda item number 11249. Next, approval of financial statements for the period ending February 2011. Agenda item number 11250. Approval of a contract with Malden and Jenkins LLC to audit the city's financial statements for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2011. Agenda item number 11251. Our fifth and final consent agenda item tonight is approval of a professional services agreement between the City of Milton and Tennell Spangler and Associates, Inc. for the purpose of providing professional planning services for the Crab Apple area. Agenda item number 11252.
Do I hear a motion to, in a second, to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion's passed. There are no reports and presentations. Moving on to the first presentation of items. Will the city clerk please sound those items?
First item is approval of an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia, to amend Chapter 38 to adopt the personnel policies of the city of Milton, outlined in Chapter 38 as a policy resolution rather than as an ordinance enactment. Agenda item number 11253. Next is approval of an ordinance to ratify and convert to ordinance from a prior resolution of the council regarding a prepaid wireless 911 wireless charge. Agenda item number 11254. Last, we have approval of an ordinance to amend Appendix A, fees and other charges of the Milton City Code. This is agenda item number 11255.
Is there a motion and second to approve the reading of the first presentations?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed by similar sign. Motion passes. Moving on to the public hearing. Will the city clerk please sound the item?
Approval of the issuance of an alcohol beverage license to Boga Group LLC, doing business as Boga Taqueria, located at 12890 Highway 9, Suite 180, Milton, Georgia, 3004. The applicant is Matardo Brasino for consumption on premises, wine and malt beverages. This is agenda item number 11256. Ms. Stacy Inglis.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. This establishment is located in the area where Myers Deli used to be, if you're familiar with that area. They originally applied for a beer, wine, and malt, distilled spirits license, but because of their close proximity to the First Academy, they are not able to get the distilled spirits section or license for that. They have they've met all the requirements for the rest of the ordinance. So staff recommends approval for beer and wine consumption on premises.
Are there any questions for Stacy and staff? Is there any public comment, Sue?
No, sir.
Public hearing is now closed. Is there any council discussion? Do I have a motion and second?
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item number 11-256, approval of the issuance of an alcohol beverage license to Boga Group LLC, doing business as Boga Taqueria, located at 12890 Highway 9, Suite 180, Milton, Georgia, 30004.
Second.
Okay, we do have a motion to approve the issuance of an alcohol license to Boga Group, LLC, DBA Boga Taqueria. The applicant is Madaro Brasino for consumption on premises, wine and malt beverages. Do we have a motion and a second? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed by similar sign. Motion passes. Moving on to the zoning agenda, will the city clerk please read the zoning rules and sound the next item?
The second regularly scheduled meeting of the month, the mayor and city council consider a zoning agenda. These items include rezoning petitions, modifications of zoning, use permits, and associated concurrent variances, in addition to ordinances, resolutions, and text amendments. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks, provided time remains with the allotted time. The city clerk will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by the city clerk prior to the beginning of tonight's meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. The Planning Commission heard the rezoning agenda items, and recommendations were forwarded to the mayor and city council for consideration and disposition. The applicant shall not submit material to the council during this meeting unless requested to do so. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the council in consideration of your application should be submitted to the staff of the Department of Community Development to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the council. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made, within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Our first zoning item was deferred to December 19th, the regular council meeting by motion and vote, which was U1102, VC 1104. Our next item is RZ 1118, to create Article 6, Division 26 of the Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 64 of the City Code, H, Historic District. This is agenda item number 11242. The first presentation was heard on November 7th. It was also discussed at the work session on November 14th. Ms. Kathy Field.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. The subject site is a 4.98 acre tract of agriculturally zoned land located on the west side of New Providence Road. Staff notes that the location map indicates 3 parcels that are currently being
Can
combined.
I interrupt for just one? I think we had the announcement was incorrect.
Backwards. Backwards, yes.
I was hoping somebody'd say something.
Yeah, I was wondering.
We're gonna sound you 1102 VC 1104. This is 12830 New Providence Road. Applicant is Interquest Church. A request to expand the existing 3,800 square foot church to add a new building consisting of an 8,320 square foot sanctuary for a total of 12,120 square feet within 2 buildings with a total of 224 seats. The applicant is also requesting a 4-part concurrent variance for the following. First, to reduce the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the west property line where the existing parking lot encroaches to a 25-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback, 64-1141 3B. Second, to reduce the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the north property line where the existing and proposed parking encroach to a 25-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback, 64-11413 3B. Third variance is to allow a 5/12 roof pitch, 64-11463 3A. And fourth, to increase the front setback from 30 feet from the landscape strip to 250 feet, 64-1145 3B. This is agenda item number 11241. First presentation was on November 7th. Ms. Kathy Field.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. The subject site is a 4.98 acre tract of agriculturally zoned land located on the west side of New Providence Road. Staff notes that the location map indicates 3 parcels that are currently being combined. The subject site is developed with an existing church with a 3,800 square foot single-story brick residence and 2 barns pursuant to use permit U00-010. The applicant is proposing an 8,320 square foot sanctuary 2-story building. Per the site plan, the barns will be demolished. Staff is undertaking a site plan analysis. Based on the applicant's site plan submitted to the Community Development Department on September 2nd, 2011, staff offers the following considerations. Parking requirements. Section 64-1410. Off-street parking calculations for churches require 1 seat per 30 square feet in the largest assembly area. The applicant has indicated there will be temporary chairs and not permanent seating in the sanctuary. The size of the largest assembly area in the sanctuary is 1,482 square feet in size and will require a total of 50 parking spaces, of which 3 will be handicapped. The site plan indicates a total of 50 spaces, of which 42 gravel parking spaces are currently developed. An additional 5 gravel parking spaces will be provided and 3 handicap spaces. It appears that the site can meet the requirements of Section 64-1141, subsections 2A. It requires that the applicant provide a 10-foot landscape island for every 72 feet of double row length or 90 feet of single row length of parking spaces. Use permit standards. The proposed site plan meets all of the development standards of Section 64-1804 for churches. The site is also within the Northwest Fulton Overlay District, and staff has reviewed the development standards pertaining to this overlay district. In regard to landscape strips, the requirement is for a 10-foot landscape strip along all public streets. The site plan indicates compliance with this requirement. In terms of buffers, the applicant is requesting 2 concurrent variances. The first concurrent variance is VC 11-04, Part 1. This is to reduce the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the west property line where the existing parking lot encroaches to a 25-foot undisturbed buffer and a 10-foot improvement setback. In regard to this variance, the applicant is requesting a concurrent variance to reduce the undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback to 25 feet along the west property line where the 6 existing parking spaces are located. In addition, the encroachment is approximately 110 foot wide along the west property line that has a total length of 415 feet. There is a significant amount of vegetation providing a visual buffer from the adjacent property to the west. Staff notes that the parking was correctly located on the site prior to the adoption of the Northwest Fulton Overlay District requirement for larger undisturbed buffers. Therefore, the staff recommends that VC 11-04 Part 1 be approved conditionally. In addition, the applicant is also requesting a concurrent variance for an additional buffer. This is VC 11-04 Part 2. This is to reduce the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the north property line where the existing and proposed parking encroach to a 25-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback. The applicant is requesting a concurrent variance to reduce the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback to 25 feet along the north property line where 7 existing parking spaces are located. The encroachment is approximately 75 feet along of the approximate 455-foot long boundary. There is a significant amount of vegetation providing a visual buffer from the adjacent property to the north. Staff notes the parking was correctly located in the site pursuant to the Northwest Fulton Overlay District's requirements. So therefore, the staff recommends that VC 11-04 Part 2 be approved conditionally. In regard to parking within the overlay, it requires that no on-site parking shall be located to the front of a building and/or between the building and the public right-of-way. The site plan meets this requirement for parking location. In terms of building height, the Northwest Fulton Overlay District requires a maximum height limit of 2 stories with a maximum height of 30 feet from average finished grade to the bottom of the roof eave. The proposed building is 17 feet 6 inches in height from average finished grade to the bottom of the eave at its highest point. The site plan meets the requirement for building height. In terms of roof pitch, the applicant is requesting a concurrent variance. This is VC 11-04, Part 3, to allow a 5/12 roof pitch. The applicant is requesting to decrease the roof pitch from 8/12 to 5/12. It states that the request is intended to support the preservation of the farm-like naturalistic ambience of the area. Secondly, the new structure will not be seen from New Providence Road. In addition, there will not be a steeple on the roof, so it will blend in with the naturalistic ambiance of the area. Therefore, based on the above consideration, staff recommends that VC 11-04, Part 3 be approved conditional. Finally, in terms of building setbacks, the applicant is requesting a fourth and final concurrent variance. This is VC 11-04, Part 4, to increase the front setback from 30 feet from the landscape strip to 250 feet. The Northwest Fulton Overlay District requires a maximum 30-foot building setback from the edge of the required landscape strip and/or easements for all properties and lots located adjacent to public rights-of-way more than 400 feet from an intersection. It is staff's opinion that the requested variance would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance, including but not limited to preserve and to ensure the harmony and compatibility of the character of the area, including its physical appearance, natural setting, and informal landscaping, and to provide for the construction of buildings and spaces that are human in scale, welcoming, and approachable. It is for these considerations that staff recommends that VC 11-04 Part 4 be approved conditional. I'd now like to review the public involvement process. On September 28, 2011, the applicant was present at the Community Zoning Information Meeting held at the Milton City Hall. There were no members of the community in attendance. The applicant has met the requirements of the Public Participation Plan and Report. The public participation meeting was held at the church on Thursday, October 6, 2011, between the hours of 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. There was no one who attended the meeting. The City of Milton Design Review Board also reviewed this application at its meeting of October the 4th, 2011, and they had the following recommendations: that the new building should be similar in style to the existing farm building house as possible and incorporate materials. The difference between the required 8-12 roof pitch and the requested 5-12 pitch is about 7 vertical feet. They prefer the higher pitch. They thought the lower roof pitch would look more industrial. They would like dormers to be considered or some treatment to break up the massive roof. But they would like to be considered wider vertical bands of hardy plank, to consider the top of building vertical, the bottom horizontal, and to consider a 5-inch wide siding which is reflective of older buildings. Also, since the north side of the property is adjacent to residential, to provide adequate landscaping to create a buffer. Also, they like the idea of a gravel parking lot which minimized asphalt. Would like to take into consideration the look of buildings across the street. And finally, although the building is not prominent on the property now, it could be in the future as the church expands. The environmental site analysis was sufficient and met the requirements of Section 64.2126. The city arborist report included the following: that it is determined that existing trees are to remain throughout most of the site with the exception of the area of the proposed sanctuary. None of the trees currently located within the area are specimen or significant trees. Also, understory buffers shall be required to be planted to buffer standards where sparsely vegetated. The City of Milton's 2030 comprehensive plan was reviewed, and the determination was that the plan recommended that the subject site be developed as agricultural, equestrian, and estate residential. In terms of use permit considerations, it is the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare. In the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, the mayor and city council may exercise limited discretion in evaluating the site proposed for use that requires a use permit. In exercising such discretion pertaining to the subject use, the mayor and city council shall consider each of the following as outlined in Section 64-1552 of the zoning ordinance: use permit considerations. Staff has reviewed said items pertaining to the subject use and offers the following comments. A, whether the proposed use is consistent with the land use or economic development plans adopted by the mayor and city council. Provided the applicant complies with the recommended conditions of this petition and the use permit requirements of Section 64-1804 of the zoning ordinance, the proposed development is consistent with the intent and following policy of the City of Milton's 2030 Comprehensive Plan, which is that we will encourage development that is sensitive to the overall setting of the community and will contribute to our community's character and sense of place. B, compatibility with land uses and zoning districts in the vicinity of the property for which the use permit is proposed. If developed in accordance with staff's recommended conditions and the provisions of the zoning ordinance, the proposed expansion is expected to be compatible with other land uses in the surrounding area. C, whether the proposed use may violate local, state, and/or federal statutes, ordinances, or regulations governing land development. The proposed use does not violate any known local, state, and/or federal statutes, ordinances, or regulations governing land development if approved with the recommended conditions. D, the effect of the proposed use on traffic flow, vehicular and pedestrian along adjoining streets. The proposed use will not create congestion, including the growing traffic on New Providence Road as cited in the applicant's traffic study. The Milton Trail Plan indicates that the trail shall be on the east side of New Providence Road and not on the subject site. E, the location number of off-street parking spaces. As indicated in the site plan analysis, the subject site requires a total of 50 parking spaces which are located on the site per the Northwest Fulton Overlay District. In addition, the existing and proposed parking will be gravel with the exception of the required handicap parking spaces. F, the amount and location of open space. The applicant's site plan indicates that approximately half of the subject site remains undeveloped. Staff is of the opinion that the proposed development will provide adequate open space for the proposed development. G, protective screening. If developed in accordance with the requirements of the zoning ordinance and requested concurrent variances, the existing wooded areas and sparsely vegetated areas planted to buffer standards will provide adequate screening to the adjacent AG1 zone properties. H, hours and manner of operation. The applicant has stated that the operations for the church will be on Sunday from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and on Tuesday from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. In addition, the building will be open for general, administrative, and counseling functions Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I, outdoor lighting. The applicant has minimal security lighting on site. Staff notes that the site shall be in compliance with Section 64-1144 of the Northwest Fulton Overlay District regarding outdoor lighting. J, ingress and egress of the property. The applicant's site plan indicates one curb cut on New Providence Road. The driveway will be required to be improved to meet minimum site distance standards and provide for two-way traffic. These requirements are reflected in the recommended conditions. Conclusion, the proposed church is consistent with council and plan policies, use permit considerations, and compatible with the surrounding area, if developed in accordance with the requirements of the zoning ordinance and staff's recommended conditions. Therefore, staff recommends approval conditional of U11-02 for the proposed expansion of the church. In addition, staff recommends approval conditional of VC 11-02, parts 1 through 4. The applicant is here to answer your questions, as are staff. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from staff or the applicant?
We're still going to have a public hearing, I mean, the staff's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our first public comment comes from Lisa Peacock.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Peacock, and I'm a member of the congregation of Interquest Church. And I just wanted to give you just kind of a brief nutshell of what we're trying to accomplish with this use permit. We've been on the 5 acres since 2000, operating as a church. The property still looks very much like what it looked like when we purchased the property. It was formerly a family's home and a horse rink, and we are meeting in the farmhouse there. We currently can seat about a 90-seat assembly population in that farmhouse, and we're just growing. We need more elbow room. Our little kids youth program is down in 2 bedrooms in the basement, and we're blessed with a growing youth program, and we don't have the room to accommodate our kids. So what we would like to do is to build some new space and move the congregation out of the farmhouse to the new building. And the new building is being designed in such a way to minimally impact the property, because the property is absolutely exquisitely beautiful. It's very wooded, it's very park-like. Our families like to have picnics on the property, and we want to maintain that feel. And it feels like a Milton farm property, and we want to keep that feel to it. So if we take down the 2 barns that are right in the middle of the 5 acres and put the new building on the footprint of one of those barns, we can avoid taking down the woodlands that are around the property. So the 3 of the 4 variances involve the boundaries of the property, and those variances are not to do something different, but rather to maintain what's already there and what's been in use the past 12 years and even prior to when we purchased the property. So for example, I'm going to take these variances one by one here. I'm going to start where it makes sense, coming into the property, which is actually variance number 4 on your list. The front property has got specimen woodlands and specimen trees in there. So this is one of the reasons we didn't want to build the new building towards the front of the property. It's a beautiful entrance. It's a very nice screen from the road. The farmhouse is just beyond these trees. We're going to keep the farmhouse in place for ancillary projects and storage. But again, the new sanctuary is being proposed more towards the middle of the property, and that's why we wanted to keep that front looking the way it does. So that's the variance number 4 on your list. Now let's go back to the back of the property. When you drive up the driveway of the property, the parking is all the way in the back of the property. And what we did was the original owner of this property had horses, and he built a pervious gravel structure here that was his horse rink. And he laid it under the gravel with irrigation piping and stuff. So it drains really well. There's never any standing water there. So if we were to have to build a new buffer here, we would have to tear into that gravel irrigation system and basically destroy what's already a good thing. One of the things we do have going for us is that this back property has a natural 6-foot-tall berm. It's a land berm with already mature trees on it. So that back neighbor has already got a nice, good screen that's been there for the entire 12 years we're there. So we're requesting the variance number 1, which is the west side, that's our back of our property, is to continue to use this gravel parking lot as we are doing. I think there might be an additional 5 spaces in there, but it's pretty much using the gravel lot as it is.
Would you like to make the point that it's just the width of the parking lot? You're not going to the entire width.
That's right. It's just going to be the width of the parking lot as you see on the site plan. It's not all the way across the boundary. Thank you. Variance number 2 is for the north boundary, which is where the driveway comes from the road up through the back of the property. It's on the north side of the property. We've had established parking spaces along that driveway for the past 12 years. There is a mature stand of trees, again, between us and our neighbor. And to move that driveway, if we had to do the overlay requirements as they typically would be required, we would have to move that driveway back into the middle of the property, take down this huge, beautiful specimen tree that's right here, and take down a few more trees. So we're trying to not disrupt this big, beautiful tree. This is actually a garden and a picnic area in here, and we would like to maintain that for the family. So we're asking to be able to continue to use that as is. Out of the 2 barns that we're going to demolish, again, these are in the middle of the property, if you can just kind of keep that in mind. This is the barn that will be demolished that will be the footprint for the new building. So it comes right up to the gravel parking lot. So the road is over here, the back of the property's over here. The big gravel parking lot's right here. And we're going to sink the new building into this hillside. There's actually a hillside that goes down. So this barn is a 2-story barn, and it sits on the land pretty much the way the new sanctuary would sit. It butts up against this hill. So the new sanctuary would actually be a 1-story building opening up to the parking lot with a full walkout basement, is basically the structure of the building. So again, we're going to kind of minimize the impact to the land. We're also asking for the lower roof pitch so we don't overwhelm the trees and become even more superbly apparent to the neighbors. We're going more for function with this building than any kind of ostentatious design. That's why we're not putting a steeple on it. We just need the room. This is what the new sanctuary would look like. The gravel parking lot would be right over here. This would be the top floor leading into the sanctuary, the front entrance, from the same viewpoint that you just saw. Again, we've got the roof pitch that we're asking for in the roof in the variance. If you would like me to pass this around, I can. We've got a black dotted line where the taller roof, kind of showing what the taller roof would look like. This particular color drawing is a drawing that we made after the courtesy review with the design review board. And we took their considerations to heart. When we went into that courtesy review meeting last month, we had presented a black and white elevation. The building was very vertical, and then I think it might have looked very industrial and kind of steel. We kind of got what their concerns were. So we talked with them in that meeting about ideas, and they said, well, look at the barn across the street. And we said, well, we don't really want to worship in a barn, but what we do want to do is we want to worship in a country house or a country-style building that maintains the flavor of our current church. And they said, okay, well, can you make it look a little bit more like your current farmhouse? So what we did was we took their suggestions to heart in this concept drawing. This is still in progress, but it's getting closer to where we want to go. We took their suggestion and made horizontal and vertical instead of just all vertical, and did a few things to soften up the look and not make it so industrial. And I'll show you a picture of the current farmhouse here. Just for comparison to the kind of the light natural color, this is what our farmhouse current sanctuary looks like. So there's a similar feel, and the new sanctuary would sit right here. So we'll have this beautiful woodlands right between the two buildings, and I think there'll be a very nice continuous feel to what we've designed. And I'm open for questions. I think that's the kind of the nutshell. We want to just let you guys know what we were thinking.
Any questions, anybody?
We don't have anybody who's indicated they're going to speak in opposition of this. You've got 43 seconds left if anybody wants to use that time up, or we'll close the public hearing and move on.
Patrick Aben.
I'm one of the founding ministers of InterQuest. And Cindy Fuller is my co-minister there. We've been, like Lisa said, we've been there for 12 years. We're part of the community. We're a growing family-style church. And like Lisa said, and as you can see by all the pictures, we're trying to fit right in. We're going to tuck that. We want to just tuck it right into the center of our property. It won't be seen from the roads, and it's right in the center of our property. It'll serve our purposes. And when we started out, we were 43 members there, and now we're like 100 members. So this building will serve us for a long time to come also, so we shouldn't have to come back and try to get another variance. So we're real happy to be in Milton, and we hope we can get consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Councilmember, before you do that, do you want to officially close the public hearing?
Yes. We've heard comments. Public hearing is now closed. Is there any council discussion now?
I just had one question of staff. I know that the Design Review Board has done their courtesy review, but will they will do a full review of it if this is approved, or does this not go back before the Design Review Board?
To go back? Yeah, it goes back for the building
But
permit.
for the real review, what they've done so
Actually,
far?
twice. It'll go for a land disturbance permit.
Okay.
It has to be approved, and then also for a building permit for the church building.
Okay.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Just an extension of what Councilmember Thurman was saying. When it comes to that design review board, obviously, to your point, you started to take into consideration a number of those. It sounds like you're still in process. I think you mentioned that that's still a work in progress. And so I would just, as we go through this process, regardless of the vote this evening, obviously you'll be returning to the design review board. And so as you do that, I would ask that you consider some of those suggestions and perhaps continue to incorporate those, whether it be type of material, and I realize that the pitch of roof, you want to try to match what you have, but just use that group as a resource because they're there obviously to help. The other, so just thank you for embracing that process. I think that's ultimately can be a real valuable win for both the applicant as well as the community. In terms of buffers, there's some mention here that in those places where there is not as heavily vegetated an area, that those will be planted to buffer standards. That seemed awfully general. I guess my question would be, I'm sure the applicant is aware of where that discussion with staff has been. I wonder, though, from the staff perspective, if it would be helpful to be more specific about which specific areas you're recommending need to be more heavily buffered.
Well, that will also be caught when we do the land disturbance review. The arborist will very specifically guide the applicant in terms of what he will be looking for those vegetated buffer areas.
Because my sense is that it's more than one area. And so I guess my only question a question that for our city attorney would be, is there any reason to be more specific or just to make it clear that it's more than just one area? And I'm sure that, again, that the applicant's aware of where those areas would be. But just the more specific we can be, sometimes the better it removes that ambiguity.
To the extent you want to exceed the city's ordinance requirements, you would need to be specific as to where you're doing it. Otherwise, it just a statement too.
It'll just be up to the discretion of our arborist, correct?
Okay.
One other question of staff. I assume this is going to be site plan specific then, so we're reducing the buffers just where they are currently marked on the site plan, so they cannot expand that and build something into the buffers other than, it looks like the only thing really they're reducing the buffers for is the parking.
That is correct, on both the west and the north sides.
And so do we need to, as part of a motion, does it need to state that it is site plan specific, or is that automatically part of your conditions? I didn't see it as part of the...
This is site plan received by the city.
But it says it's site plans, but it doesn't say that it was specific.
Well, we say where the existing parking lot encroaches to a 25-foot undisturbed buffer. So that's the specificity that we're using there.
Is that specific enough that they know that the buffer's not for the entire thing, but just for where it is marked on the site plan? The variance of the buffer, excuse me. It says it's depicted on the site plan, so I assume that that's...
That was the site plan as of September 2nd, so to your point, on
Right.
that site plan or that which would be forthcoming.
It really goes, it speaks to the site plan.
Okay.
As a condition.
And it would be based on the site plan that we received today, which is dated November 1st. September 1st.
September 2nd, which is what it says.
This one says September 1st.
September 2nd?
So they did not issue those site plans
Just
September the 2nd, 2011.
to be
Okay, stamp received. Revision dated, okay.
to be clear, it's dated September 1st, received September 2nd.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Within the analysis, it's noted that it is not intended for this site or for this new building to be used for child care purposes. And obviously, it states what it is intended to be used for. I know that that sometimes can be a concern for residents, just because it brings a different traffic pattern than would be there otherwise. And because the applicant has expressly said that that is not the intent, would it be possible for staff to just incorporate that within your recommended conditions so that, again, it's very clear what the expectation is?
Yes, because right now it just speaks to the property for a 225-seat church and accessory uses.
And the accessory use is not clear, but the analysis does mention, and the applicant is specific, that it was not intended to be used for child care purposes.
But they would have to get a use permit for child care, to use it for child care other than during church services, correct?
Yes.
And licensed.
Can the applicant perhaps state their intent? Even though, yes, a separate process would entail, I think that, again, the more specific we could be with that accessory use, if there would be no harm in that, I think it would make it clear. And would the applicant have any concern with stating that the intent is not to have that be for child care purposes? Okay, so knowing that the intent is not to have a daycare, if we could just state that, what would be the recommendation of our community development director within that accessory use, just to make that clear?
I would then modify that, the first sentence under 1A to read, to restrict the use of the subject property to a 224-seat church and accessory uses, comma, not including a daycare use, for a total of 12,120 square feet within two buildings at a maximum density of 2,430 square feet per acre, whichever is less.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, Alan?
Yeah, I thought it was nicely done, nicely presented. I'm glad to hear that you guys are expanding.
Do you have a planning background? Do you have a planning background? Yeah.
I have a regulatory affairs FDA background.
Oh, do you?
Dear me.
Cool.
I just had one comment, and it's regarding the City of Milton DRB meeting on page 16. It states new buildings should be similar in style to the existing farm building / house as possible and incorporate materials. Well, I would hope that if they're building a building, they would incorporate materials. Was it the intent to incorporate similar materials?
Similar materials, I think that was a typo. So.
Thank you. I don't mean to be picky. If there are no more comments, questions, do I have a motion and second?
Councilman, I move that we approve, and I guess I have to read this exactly, U11-02/VC 11-04-12830 New Providence Road, applicant Interquest Church, a request to expand the existing 3,800 square foot church to add a new building consisting of 8,320 square foot sanctuary for a total of 12,120 square feet within two buildings with a total of 224 seats. The applicant is also requesting a four-part concurrent variance as stated here, and with the additional condition voiced by Councilmember Bailey.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and second. Is there any discussion?
I just want to clarify that the comment that you're referencing is including the non-allowance of daycare use, correct?
Correct.
Specifically under 1A.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that was the comment.
We have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by similar sign. Motion carries. Next item, RZ 11-18.
Thank you.
Has been deferred to December 19th, 2011.
Mayor Pro Tem, just as a matter of course, and Chris, this might be a question for you, because we had citizens, it appeared, coming in after the approval of the agenda, Would it be appropriate to at least state for the record that a public comment was provided early on? Because I think that there were some people that seemed to come into the audience afterwards, or if nothing, just to state for the record why that item is no longer before us this evening.
You can further explain the deferral if you'd like.
Just,
That it
just
occurred?
some people came in and they may not realize why that was deferred.
Yeah, for the record, the deferral occurred of this item at the approval of the meeting agenda. It'll be heard on December the 19th, 2011 at 6 o'clock.
Correct. And it will be advertised again appropriately.
That is correct.
Moving on to unfinished business, will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Next item is approval of an annual reenactment of the ordinance approving and establishing the regulation of solid waste collection services within the city of Milton and providing for the scope and nature of the operation of such services. This is agenda item number 11240. First presentation was heard on November 7th. Mr. Matt Marietta.
Good evening. This is our annual reiteration of our desire to regulate the provision of solid waste services to this community. Nothing has changed in the ordinance. We are just reaffirming that we want to regulate solid waste, and also the contract that we have with the current 15 companies that are on the list. Just to let you know, I've had scant complaints, very few complaints in reference to violations, and those have been dealt with fairly expeditiously. There's a couple companies that were getting a little tardy in their payment of the 5% infrastructure maintenance fee, but I'm working with all three of those right now. Two of them have come into compliance, and the other one hopefully should be fairly shortly. There's kind of a GIS issue as far as dealing with what addresses are actually in the city of Milton, which ones are in the city of Alpharetta that I'm dealing with. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Have any questions?
No, it's my understanding that we need to go ahead and approve this so that we still meet the qualification to be a city and provide the three services.
That's right. As you all are aware, there's 6 services that are options for being provided to be eligible for local option sales tax. We don't do 3 of them, which are water, sewer, and library. So when you don't do 3 of them and you need 3, you got to do the other 3, which are police, fire, and solid waste. So on many fronts, it is the right thing for the city to do, but that implication exists by not adopting this ordinance.
Thank you. Matt, Robertson Sanitation, I
Yes.
noticed they're not on here anymore.
Actually, I believe Robertson Sanitation has been melded with another company. There was
really?
actually a buyout where 2 or 3 of them were purchased by one company, and they asked that it be blended on the list so the calls go to one location, but I believe they actually have individual trucks or trash cans out, if that's the genesis of your
All right,
question.
cool.
Thank you. One, just thank you for your increased tracking of the fees and making sure that we're monitoring those providers on behalf of citizens. If you can just clarify quickly, does the tracking of the collection of those fees, Matt, does that lie with you, or is that being handled in combination with you and Stacy English's office?
That generally happens between me and Honor Moats, who works for
Okay, so
Steve
you're
English.
tracking those
Yes,
company by
yeah, I
company?
actually have a list. It works out between anywhere $14,000 to $17,000 a quarter.
Okay, thank you, which was my next question. And then the other is, in terms of the recycling requirements, at the time that this was put into play, one of the requirements was that all of these providers are to provide recycling services. I would just ask that, separate from this evening, that be something that you provide some additional preview on, because I believe that some of these providers are not providing that. I hear from citizens often that they'd like to recycle, but that their provider doesn't necessarily provide that, and or that they're going to charge an incremental fee, which was not the intent of this ordinance. So I do think that's an additional component that we need to be tracking, that I think we could just maybe enhance what we're doing in terms of tracking that ordinance.
I definitely agree with that, and I've heard the same thing. One thing I would like to ask, if you do have, as council members, have somebody come to you and register that complaint, have them also send me an email and contact me, so it gives
We
me something to
encourage
start
that,
with.
but you just
Yes,
never know
please.
if they make it from us to you. But I can say, I think definitively that we need to track who is providing recycling services, because not everybody
agree.
is. And I think that perhaps some of those providers are not aware, or they claim not to be aware, that that is a requirement of being a city-sanctioned entity. entity. So
I
thank
believe you are correct. There are some that are not providing the side legs, so.
Like the one I just mentioned.
Nothing mentioned anything.
There's no more discussion. Thank you, Matt. I'll entertain a motion in a
Matt?
second.
I'll make a motion that we approve the annual reenactment of the ordinance approving and establishing the regulation of solid waste collection services within the city of Milton and providing for the scope and nature of the operation of such services. Agenda item 11-240.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, similar sign. Motion passes. Moving on to new business, will the city clerk please sign the item?
Approval of a resolution amending resolution number 09-11110, a resolution appointing a member to the City of Milton Design Review Board for District 1. Agenda item number 11257. Councilmember Karen Thurman.
Thank you. I'd like to put forth for approval for the Design Review Board, Marty Littleton on Freemanville Road. Marty has been married to his wife Barbara for 15 years and the proud father of 5 children, Kyle, Sherry, Betty, Leslie, and CJ. He enjoys the outdoors and spending time with his family and volunteering time and service on the Milton High School cross-country trail, something near and dear to my heart. He is a managing partner of Milton Heating and Air. He is a former developer and real estate agent. He is a National Outstanding Lifetime Achievement Award from Metro Brokers in 2005. He was chairman for the Real Estate Board of Cobb Housing, Inc., and he has developed several subdivisions and parks in Marietta, Georgia, and he received the Outstanding Citizen Award from the City of Marietta in December of 2005. So we're very happy to have Marty Littleton, and he's very anxious to serve the city on the Design Review Board. And he will be sworn in at the next council meeting.
Okay, we have a recommendation for Milton DRB for District 1, Mr. Marty Littleton. All those in favor of approval signify, or at least a motion. Give me a motion first. Oh.
I make a motion to approve agenda item 11-257, amending resolution 09-11-11-0 to appoint Mr. Martin Littleton to the DRB.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by similar sign. Motion carries. Moving on to mayor and council reports. Since the real mayor is not here tonight, I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish everybody a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Anyone else?
I would echo that thought.
Okay.
It wasn't scientific, but I did go out and sample the traffic at the local beer and wine establishments in the city on Sunday.
Doing research.
And they seem to have quite a bit of traffic. So, for what it's worth, I think that our passing of that law on Friday was a good deal.
It's a revenue producer.
And I do have it taped on WSB if anyone would like to see our mayor's, because they did interview him. So I know Chris was out of town and did not get to see it. So
Alan, do you have some?
Yes, sir. Chris, do you have an update for us on the memo that was provided by Urban Collage? I know there have been some email discussion between you and I and Ken.
Yeah, and the update that I have at this point is that's what has been provided. That's what they feel is responsive to the request that they were given. And I also, recognize that there are members of this council who are diametrically opposed as to what the next step should be with respect to the urban collage issue. So if that's something that bringing it up in a public forum is the right thing to do, because I need to know what the direction of this body is for the next steps, if there is a next step that you all would like me to take. I know that Councilmember Tart, I know what you're referring to is to want some additional information.
Yeah, the list that was provided by the consultant was basically a list of people who may or may not have been interviewed and who may or may not have been part of small meetings. It wasn't clear as to who was interviewed that fed into their financial analysis. And they've been unwilling to provide that specificity with regard to the request that I asked for. The question I have is because that is subject to open records, is it even a vote of this council that would make that determination? I mean, does this council necessarily vote on whether or not to abide by state law? And if the council decides not to abide by state law, are they personally liable, or is the city liable if there's...
I guess the issue I've got at this point is I have seen communication from a couple of different perspectives on this topic, and the perspectives are quite opposite. And the perspectives is related to what's appropriate in a planning process such as this. What's the right level of push to go get certain information? What is that right amount? And I obviously, when you end up in one of those situations, one of the benefits of having this style of government is that a city manager really responds and acts to the pleasure of the council. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I would act differently if you were to say, Chris, I'm taking off my council member hat, and this is how I want to go about getting this information. Now, I probably act totally different. But if this is something that you're seeking additional information as a council, I need to make sure that before I go and push for that information that I have the support of this council to do that, because effectively I would be pushing to get something that at this point, at least the initial response is whether or not we get that things are available with the open records law. I get that. There's a differing opinion as to what's the best way to get good information out of people when you conduct those interviews. So this is a very productive conversation to have, because I need to know. I need to know if I'm being directed to take a next step by this body or not.
Okay, well, I'm a little bit concerned right now because Councilmember Tart just made a statement about, are we willing to support the law? And, come on. That's what we swore to do when we took office here. So what I would like to know is there a law being broken? Because to me, based on everything that I've heard and my understanding of what we're doing with Urban Collage and the function that they serve and the product that they produce, we're not in any kind of violation. So if that's not right, somebody needs to say so. And the only person that I know that can make a judgment call on that is our city attorney. So where does he stand on this?
To the extent I am become familiar with the information, my understanding is that a request has been made to a contractor for the city for certain information, and that there has been some, although perhaps not as much response to that request. I'm not aware of anything that this council has done that would have broken any laws. I mean, this is information that I understand it is the city attorney's position is subject to the Open Records Act and thus would be available to this council or anyone for that matter, any individual citizen. That being said, the way this council approaches the refusal is one that is up to this council to determine and direct. But there's nothing we can do about whether or not this individual contractor provides the documents that would constitute our breaking any Open Records Act laws.
And let me break it down for you, Joe. When we got the memo from Urban Collage that basically, paraphrase said the following individuals participated in small meetings and or interviews. I called Chris and I said, Chris, I asked specifically for the names of the individuals that participated in the interviews that fed into the sustainability comment. And to that, Chris responded and said, well, the contractor resisted even giving this and said, we don't have to provide that information because we're interpreting a certain provision of your contract that says that we don't have to provide that information to you. And Chris, in consultation with Ken, said, well, with all due respect, our attorney doesn't agree. And so they provided what they thought might help. They provided the memo that they did. I called Chris and said, no, that is not what we asked for. We didn't ask for, here's a list of people, choose which ones you think might have participated in interviews. We asked for very specific information. I would like that information. And then Chris said, well, there appears to be a majority of council, or could be a majority of council, that has indicated that they would like that information to remain confidential. And to that I said, well, that information is not really up for discussion on whether that could be confidential or not because it's subject to the open records. He said, well, you need to bring that up in during council reports. So what I guess Chris is looking for is he needs some direction from this council as to whether or not to go back to Urban Collage and say, no, this is not the information that was asked for. If this council says, no, we feel that information should stay confidential, then if and when there is an open records request, then council would have said, a majority of council would have said, we want that information to stay confidential. And then there would be an open records request if the council or if Urban Collage or someone, the city, refused to give that information, then the city would be in danger of being.
I do want to clarify one point, if you'll allow me to. And the point is that I don't know that there's necessarily, or that my intent, if I said it, was that this council, that there might be a differing of opinion that would want the information to remain confidential. What I would more mean there is that I believe that there's a differing of opinion that this planning process to be effective, that to go seek that information or to not would make absolutely no difference to the ultimate planning deliverable, and therefore how aggressive do we want to go after this information, and what likely is the unintended outcome of, effectively taking a pretty strong position against a consultant that we're hoping provides a deliverable that we can use and actually grow from. So I don't want to frame it as though there would be a single member of this council who would say, gosh, keep something confidential that is otherwise transparent. But more along the lines of, you're going to go get that test done because you're going to make a different decision based on the results.
I've got a question. We send out a lot of surveys. We did park surveys. We did all kinds of surveys. And those surveys allow people to give us their opinion with or without giving us their name and address and everything else along with that. And that's really what this consultant did, was just a survey with one-on-one type or group type interviews. Are we violating something by sending out a survey and allowing people not to put their name and address on it? Because that's really what this is, the same type of situation, other than that they are actually interacting with the people. What's the difference?
I think one difference is just that this is a contract that is being paid for by taxpayer dollars.
So did our survey.
Well, but it's not a survey. It's not intended to be a blind survey. And the reality is that it is open and subject to the Open Records Act. Our city attorney has said so. Chris, part of your question was what would be a next step. A next step that I would have would be that we ask for our city attorney, and with all due respect, Paul, because Ken's the one that has spoken to this issue directly, I think that we need Ken Gerard to state again what he has stated, I think, to several of us, I'm sure individually, but I think we need to hear that collectively. What I've heard Ken say is that this information is absolutely open to the Open Records Act, and for them not to provide that is a bit unusual. To me, it's such a basic premise, is that they're a contractor, they're doing work for the city. Why in the world is there a question about this data being confidential? It's very straightforward. I don't understand why it's an issue at all. It seems to be a function of work product, and it's part of a work product that candidly taxpayers are paying for. And so if it's available via open records, that's just the law, and I think they should provide it as a matter of open records. To not provide it causes question, and I think our city, if you just provide the data, it's a non-issue. To not provide the data is what creates the issue. And so to me, it's a very simplistic, straightforward approach. One, have Ken state what he's already stated for the record, as he did at our last work session, and that is that it is indeed open to the Open Records Act. The other is to simply say to Urban Collage, guys, in good faith, you're a reputable consultant, just provide the data. It's that simple.
Well, I don't think it's that simple, really. It's not, because
In my opinion, it is that straightforward. So that's just. with all
Okay,
due
can I
respect.
speak?
Yeah, but you did cut me off. I was in the middle of concluding my statement, which was.
I apologize, then. Please finish.
Thank you. Was that very candidly is that I think it is, and what Chris said was, what do we think are some proposed next steps? So I think having Ken make a statement, I think stating the obvious to Urban Collage, which it is open to open records, whether it's this council that asks it, and I think the third is to the issue of what is the role of city manager versus this council, because it is a staff-initiated LCI. And I do think our charter is pretty specific, that obviously we are a strong city manager charter community. I think based on that, it's really not up to mayor and council to decide how our city manager and staff should go about the business of pursuing appropriate deliverables from a contractor who is being paid for by city dollars, effectively taxpayer dollars. So I personally believe, Chris, and even though it may make it a little bit uncomfortable for you, I think that really it's really not up to mayor and council decision. I think it's up to our staff to make a decision that's based on open records requests and for you to pursue with Urban Collage the data that would be part of a typical work product. And so with that, I do conclude my statement, and so thank you, Joe, for that time to complete my thought.
I apologize for butting in, but the point I would say before we do anything about trying to figure out is this subject to open records, this, that, or the other, we need a definitive statement on what our contract covers, because my understanding is our contract covers a deliverable that is basically a report, and there is a methodology and a process to get to that report, okay? And the methodology and the process is something that Urban Collage has used multiple times. And personally, I like the idea of being able to go out and get as many pieces of information and data to put together that report as possible. And if some of it flies in the face of what we would consider true or factual, that's immaterial, because we've paid Urban Collage for their opinion. We didn't pay them for our opinion. We paid them for their opinion. If they want to use whatever sources of information, put that together, provide that report to us, which again is the work product, it's up to us to deem how valuable that is. Okay? These guys have a reputation. They're not some fly-by-the-night organization. They didn't just spring up yesterday. This isn't their first rodeo. Okay? They do this all the time. They've done it for us before. We've engaged Urban Collage before. Okay? So questioning their methods and questioning their process and questioning the way that they put that data together, to me, seems a little bit silly.
And I appreciate your comments on that, Councilmember Longoria. I guess I see my job as being a steward of tax dollars and making sure that tax dollars are spent efficiently and effectively. And I don't necessarily go on solely on a company's reputation and turn the other way in regards to methods, because I feel that to the extent that this company has interviewed certain individuals and did comparisons with surrounding municipalities that fed into statements regarding our overall financial sustainability as a city, which in turn will feed into recommendations to this council, which will in turn feed into changes in laws and policies that will not only affect the Highway 9 area, but the city in general. I think not only is it appropriate to request that information, but it's legally acceptable to provide that information.
Okay, my point is, when you make a statement like you're supposed to be looking out for the taxpayers, you're implying that I'm not.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying that's my feeling
like
on it.
That's what you said. And,
that's my
so
feeling.
I take one exception to that. Okay.
Karen?
I agree with Councilmember Longoria in the fact that we need to rely on our professionals. And if our professionals feel like they need to look at all the information they have available to them, including all their past history of what they have done in the past. They have given us a list of the stakeholders that were involved in the situation, which I think is important for us to know who that list is. but I do not believe we need to know what individual conversations were with any particular stakeholder. I think that is a huge mistake on our part. We don't have people filling out the LCI stuff online right now. They don't have to put in a name and address. If they did, you'd have no one probably completing some of that stuff. So we've never had anybody have to fill in names and address on any of the other surveys we've sent out. So I don't know why we're expecting our paid consultant to provide information that we, our city, don't require when we gather information.
I have one comment here, kind of wrapping this up. I think we've been up and down the pole on this one. We've hired a consultant who's an expert in his industry. We rely upon these consultants. They have standard methods and procedures to conduct their business and to produce the deliverables that we've asked of them. I have not read Urban Collage's contract, but I would doubt that there's any indication in there, and we can research that, that they are obligated to produce any confidential information that they have to come up with their conclusions. I think we better leave this sleeping dog slept, is what they say. One more, and let's wrap this up.
Just to be clear, I think that when we had our work session last week, and I'll remove the word I think, I'm quite confident that we had a discussion about confidentiality and that Ken spoke to it expressly, that the contract with Urban Collage does not give them any opportunity for confidentiality in terms of precluding data. They've claimed that. Ken has responded and said that that's not appropriate. That's not his interpretation as a city attorney for the city of Milton. So I don't believe that, and of course we can re-review that, but our city attorney has stated that, I think, very clearly. The second is that the question that was asked is what's the difference? I think part of the difference here is that it's a reliance on data. And Urban Collage and the gentleman that spoke from Urban Collage expressly talked about a reliance on that data and a reliance on those interviews. And so that is a difference. The other difference is that it is a contract with a third party, and that the methodology that typically goes with such a contract is that that data is all provided. And again, the very nature of the angst around providing that data calls into question all the more reason that information should absolutely be forthcoming. And just a final statement is that when we give an indication that questioning methods or methodologies would be silly, I would hope that anybody on this council is continually looking to question and to evaluate and to pose reasonable questions, because just because someone goes through a methodology doesn't necessarily mean that that's the methodology that is the most thorough or the most appropriate. And yes, of course we hire people as professionals, but I hope that this council and future councils will continue to question the business of this city. That's why we're here. We're not here to simply rubber stamp everything that comes before us. In reasonable, intelligent questioning is exactly why we're here. And I would hope, and I would implore those that will be in the seat following December 31st to ask questions. And if we're not in the business of asking questions, gee, why bother to be here? So it's very important that we ask about questions and methodology, and that we're continually asking for a better end product. I think our citizens deserve that.
Julie, I mean, you can't really be serious in saying that we don't ask questions. My gosh, we ask more questions than anybody I know.
I was responding to the point that we shouldn't question the methodology.
No, that's not the point. The point is, why are we on this witch hunt is the point. And there's only two potential answers. One, we think Urban Collage made up the information. Okay? If we think they made up the information, then they're a vendor we shouldn't be doing business with. Okay? If we don't think they made up the information, what you're really looking for is the person that said it.
No.
Okay? And I think that's unreasonable.
And I want to make a comment, because everybody else has gone around twice, that we did hire a third party to administer our park survey. We never once told them. They administered a survey that asked for confidential information. We never once asked them just said, we never once went to them and said, hey, we got to find out who said what and who wants what within the city. We're relying on those results that they supplied to us with that information without knowing who exactly said it. We got to at some point in time rely on the professionals we hire, and we got to make sure we ask questions to make sure we hire the right professionals. Urban Collage has a tremendous reputation, and I feel confident that we hired the right professionals when it comes to that LCI grant.
I would agree, and we need to rely on these professionals, and we need to rely on staff as well to provide us with the information that we need. And I think we beat this horse enough.
So, Chris, I
don't know what more we're going to accomplish.
You have 3 of the 5 council members have said not to provide that information through the means in which it was asked. So there are other ways to get that information, as I've already discussed with you.
Just to be clear, I don't believe the instruction was that this board is not going to produce the information. Question is what is the response to the rejection, or what is this council's next step in light of the response of the contractor, Urban Collage? He's looking for what direction he needs to take it. I don't think this council is withholding anything at the moment.
I heard loud and clear that this council doesn't want to pursue that any further, period. I mean, did I hear that wrong?
Does this require a vote?
It doesn't. What I am taking away at this point is that if I were to sit at my desk tomorrow morning, that based on this discussion tonight, that the council is satisfied. Granted, some are not, and I get that. But if I'm looking for a council direction, the council that's seated here tonight is satisfied with the deliverable that was provided last week.
Okay, let's be a little bit more clear than that.
That memorandum that we got that listed names.
All right.
Yeah. I would not be in favor of spending any additional staff time trying to get additional information.
And I'm just going to go back to my question, because the question that you had posed, and I think that because of the council questions that just came up as a matter of this discussion, one of which was, do we have a contractual, a contract with Urban Collage that says that data is confidential? I think we need to confirm that.
I don't believe we do. I can tell you that tonight. I don't believe that there's anything in the contract that would indicate any of the documents or otherwise that are produced in the course of this study meet the requirements for non-disclosure under the Open Records Act.
Right, so there is no confidentiality.
If I was to be in receipt of an open records request, I don't believe that the documents, to the extent that they exist, and again, this is something that, this isn't a file folder. I get to walk down to the community development department and say, council members, I'll copy it for you. This is.
No, it would just be an open records request to Urban Collage.
Kind
and said, "This please
well, no,
produce
they
the
wouldn't be the
information."
open records request recipient. The open records request recipient is the government who's contracted with Urban Collage, which is what puts me in a bit of a precarious position here. Is I'm talking about filing an open records request against myself, and that doesn't work. So, at this point, if the direction of the council is for me to push our consultant further for further information, that you're not satisfied with the level of information they provided you to this point, I'll take that direction and go try to do that.
Can I just ask a simple question? One, I would, of course, use a very different word from push. To me, it's just a simple request that says, guys, our city attorney says the data's not confidential. Obviously, there are, there are some who believe that having that information is a matter of course. I don't understand why that's not just a simple question. And the third goes back to, I don't believe it's a matter of mayor and council giving direction to city manager on this item, because I think our charter indicates that this is a job that you, our city manager, in consult with our staff, are to be pursuing in terms of the methodology and how we pursue things. I don't believe it's something that comes back to us to say, should you make sure that we've got the data necessary to be confident as a community and as a city that we have data that allows somebody like an Urban Collage to come back with whatever information they have. And again, I think part of the difference very much is tied to the statement that we heard the consultant indicate that they perhaps made a little bit out of hand when they talked about financial stability or sustainability. And I think it goes back to Councilmember Thurman's point about what makes the difference. Part of the difference is that some of those that were interviewed have a financial interest in seeing certain areas of Highway 9 or other areas expanded. That makes a difference. And so if they're going to rely on data that came from an entity that has a personal financial interest, that's different. It is different. And I think there's lots of examples out there that would indicate that when you have a financial interest, that it's a little bit different. And so I think that as a matter of course, and as a matter of relying on those professional entities, it is our job, it is a requirement of this council and of this city and of our staff to ensure that we have that data as full disclosure. And anytime we start to pull back from transparency and full disclosure, to me, the question mark gets bigger and the red light gets larger. Why in the world would people resist providing full disclosure? It shouldn't be a big deal. And anyway,
These guys are professionals. They didn't make their decision and make a comment based on interviews within the community. They made their decision, I mean, they made their
I haven't
comments.
made any decisions, I hope.
They made their comments based on their own professional opinion, which is not just interviewing
Well, we
people.
don't know
So-
that because they won't give us the information.
Chris.
They told us
Yes, I
that. They
think
came
it-
right out and said that.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Earlier in this meeting, in this book right here, which has all the notes and information that we were supposed to review today for the meeting,
Yes, sir.
there was a zoning ordinance submitted by Interquest Church. Okay? In that packet were a set of drawings and a memo from our city planner, our development director rather, stating what the city's recommendation was, what staff's recommendation was to this. If somebody were to call up and request an open records report on information that went into that particular report, what would you provide?
Anything that was responsive to the request.
Okay.
I mean, if it was, generally, if it's a document created by the government, it's available.
Exactly. Okay. So,
But let me take that one step further.
All
It's
right.
not required under the open or under the disclosure laws that you create a document that otherwise doesn't exist.
okay. I
Like if you were to
understand.
ask for something and it didn't exist, we wouldn't have to go make it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, I think that's my point. Okay, we provide information that exists. Okay, and if two people talk in the hall regarding that zoning variance, and part of their conversation becomes part of that report where we say we recommend that this take place, we're not tracking down every single person that had any comment on why we were going to create that, and we wouldn't be expected to put together all those little conversations and discussions that we had. Now, if it was part of an email or if it was part of something else, sure, maybe we could do it then. So I think this looking for who said what is just a little bit difficult to understand for somebody that we're really asking. What we're asking for is a report. That's what we're asking them for.
And I think we've received that. We received the deliverable that was asked for in the contract. And I don't see where we're going much further with this tonight. I think there seems to be opinion here that the right result or the right answer was not produced in this report, and we want to justify that answer somehow.
Well, the report's not even done yet.
Well, that's
That's
true.
the presentation.
It's just the presentation, excuse me. And, shoot, they haven't completed the terms of their contract yet. And I'd say we wait until the whole report is completed and submitted.
Just for comparison, some of the stakeholder interviews that have gone into things such as the Crabapple Master Plan, the Birmingham Crossroads Master Plan, and we could go on and on and on. It is a matter of course that when stakeholder interviews are held, not conversations in the hallway, not a conversation by the water cooler, but when stakeholder interviews as a matter of course are taken, they become a matter of public record, and you can go back and look at any of those documents produced in other communities. That's the difference. And again, it really shouldn't be a function of folks getting argumentative, and it's disappointing to me to hear sort of argumentative tones. I think we can be respectful and have a difference of opinion about what meets that standard of confidentiality, what meets a standard of transparency. I respect your opinion, and I hope that there would be mutual respect for a difference of opinion. That's what makes good local government work. And so with that, I would hope that we would maybe Chris, you can get some additional insight from Ken, as to whether or not it's really something that's up to a majority of mayor and council, and/or if that's something under our charter that really you and our staff should be pursuing or not, to the satisfaction of what you believe would meet the standard when you benchmark us against other cities and what's expected of them. That would be my request, because I do have a reliance on our city manager and our staff to, especially with the newest member of our community development staff who has 30 years of experience. I would suspect that you've seen a lot of consultants, and you know what is a matter of appropriate disclosure. And so I would just hope that our staff would have some dialogue about this in concert with Kim. But that would be
I
my
absolutely don't mind taking a position on this topic. I don't mind in the least. But I do believe, and we have a different of opinion here as to when I've got a council that's as diametrically opposed as this, the place that you go to find that direction when we're this far apart is to look to the body that provides the policy direction for the city. I'm happy to take a position.
And I think that my only difference is that
I don't
see
know
it
that
as
that's
I don't
appropriate.
see it as a policy decision. I see it more as how does staff and our city manager manage the contracts that are helping to produce an LCI. And again, it's really probably not worth any more dialogue about this evening.
I would like-
That's my distinction.
I would like to just make one comment, though. If you're going to do that, then when it comes to like the crabapple and Lou Oliver's work, then you need to go and get documentation from Lou as far as every conversation that he had regarding the crabapple update, and every conversation he had with any council members or anyone in the community as far as that. Because if we're going to start making our consultants give us information concerning absolutely every conversation they had, then it's going to greatly increase the contracts and the cost of the city, because it will require a tremendous amount of their time.
And I don't think that's what anybody's suggesting. I think that there were
Okay,
stakeholder
I think we
interviews,
write
and it was
this thing up.
suggested that those stakeholder interviews be provided. That's very different than requiring every conversation. The extremes of this conversation are very enlightening, but interesting if nothing else.
We set, Chris? Move forward?
Yes.
Clear as mud.
Okay.
Clear as mud.
Moving on to staff reports.
Staff reports, just a reminder that at the next meeting of the council, we have to be ready to appoint the charter commission, so I'm still looking for an appointee from the mayor, and then one also collectively of the council. I know the mayor's not here, but we're going to need those names for the meeting of December 5th. We have been provided a name by Senator Albers. We're waiting on a name from Representative Jones and Senator Schaefer, I believe. So if any of y'all have contact with either of those two elected officials, we're striking out getting a name from them. So help us out if you happen to cross
Jan
paths.
told me that she did.
We haven't been.
She told me that she had somebody in mind. She has not asked them yet, I do not believe, so she.
Gotcha.
And I have no idea who that person is, so I think until she asked them, she did not want to make that, and they agreed to serve, she didn't want to make that name known.
And Chris, can you just reiterate then, from this body, we're going to come up with one name amongst 6 of us, and then the mayor was going to separately have a name?
That's correct.
I think we were supposed to tell who we individually thought should do it and give that to Bert.
I think Bert was trying to coordinate that.
Do we know if that has, I know that Bert's not here to speak for himself, but would it be reasonable for you to maybe reach out to Bert and find out if, because I think at this point, I know at least that I'm not aware of all those names that have bubbled up. So to prepare appropriately for the 5th, it would be helpful to,
Sure.
Or if everybody needs to reach back out to Bert or whatever that process would be, so we don't show up on the 5th and go, who is it that we're all contemplating?
Sure. I will. I'm going to wait till next week. I mean, this is a hard time of the season to lose a family member, so I'm going to be respectful of some distance for a little bit and not burden Bert with work.
I'm not aware of that, so.
They do have to be a resident of Milton.
Yes, they do have to be a resident.
So we can talk about that separately, but
yeah. Only other update I'll have for you tonight, and actually I'll save that until after I have a meeting in December. It's probably too premature to bring that one up. So that's all I have tonight.
Okay. There's no executive session. This concludes the regular meeting. Is there a motion that we adjourn?
Mayor Pro Tem, I put forward a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, similar sign. Meeting's adjourned.